Yeah. So it wasn't a person. There wasn't really anybody out there banging the drum for agile. Not in my world, at least. It started with a problem. You've got a system. Okay, working in the healthcare world, it matters you get this stuff right? And we had to have a high throughput processing system. So taking messages in from all sorts of disparate clinical systems and ship the messages to the right place at the right time, etc., etc. You can't have people test this. I mean, yes, they can, but they're very, very slow. And when you're putting hundreds of thousands of messages through this an hour, you can't test that with humans. Which really had us as a team go out with that question of how do you check that this is right? Because it matters. We're talking about the right people being in the right wards, going to the right theatres, getting the right drugs. This is about as real life and death as you can get in software, right? People's lives were impacted by us if we got it wrong. And we didn't want to because I tend to think of us as decent human beings. Um, so what we did was we went out and we came across test-driven development, unit testing, this really low-level way of understanding, does your code do what you think it does? Really being able to test the absolute bowels of the code, tiny, tiny things. And that sort of got us into things like continuous integration. Well, if we can write little things and get feedback on this does what I think, can we write bigger things and get feedback on that? And suddenly we're starting to look at bigger pieces, which led us into, well, is there a program out there that will run all these tests for us automatically? The idea was out there, continuous integration, but actually there wasn't a whole lot else. So we started building these tools that were about giving us feedback that this software was technically correct. It did what we as developers thought it should be doing. And we were working closely with doctors and nurses and project managers and all sorts of people. But it really was that feedback that got me hooked. That idea of we can make a change and understand the impact. We can talk directly to people and be able to show them. As a team, we kind of got sucked into extreme programming, though I don't think any of us really knew what it was at the time. And it's only when I left there that people started talking to me about Agile and Scrum and I was sort of putting all the pieces. These were all articles and things we'd found over the internet that we threw into the mix as teams and played around with. We were exploring. This was people had walked this path, but they were few and far between. And we are in the early 2000s. It's hard to find this stuff out, particularly if you don't know what you're searching for. If you don't know the words to search for, because we weren't searching for what is an agile way to. We were just typing in, how do I check my code works? I've got a thing. How do I bolt these things together to create a bigger thing? Very, very much problem statements going in, not the language, the terminology that we have today. And that really kicked me off. It wasn't a person, it was a problem. It was that realization we can't solve this with the tools we've got. And in solving the problem through feedback, realizing actually feedback is probably key to all of this. This ability to build a thing and get told straight away whether or not it works. And as I left that company and went out as a consultant, it was repeating that lesson over and over and over. We can do it at the smallest level of the code all the way up, to build a thing and give it to the customer and they can tell me, okay, well, that's a good feedback loop. How do I make it smaller and smaller and smaller? So I think, as with a lot of practitioners who started, well, before some of the modern practitioners were born, we didn't have people. There definitely are people out there who were talking to the leading lights of Agile as it turned into. But most of us were grabbing these disparate ideas and combining things in interesting ways And it was only when we stumbled on something else and we pulled that in and we're suddenly like, oh, this makes better sense. Let's do that. Um, so it's really interesting when people say, who got me started? It wasn't a who. It was very much, how do I fix a problem? Which I think we tend to have lost sight of now.